Hi there. I made over 100 custom Universes Beyond Subnautica Magic the Gathering cards. And that was a lot of words I just said that probably didn't make too much sense to you if you didn't know, well, what those words meant. If that didn't sound like complete gibberish to you, and you are already familiar with both Subnautica and Magic the Gathering, then please, by all means, skip to this point in the video. As in, this point, the one I'm gonna... this point, the one I'm gonna point to over here. Skip there, because you don't have to hear me give a quick rundown of this stuff. Go on, do it. Alright, now I'm assuming if you stuck around, you don't know either one or the other of these two franchises, so let me give you a quick rundown. Subnautica is an underwater survival horror game that leans a lot more towards exploration and atmosphere. It's been a game that I've been obsessed with for many years, and started playing back when the early beta got announced. However, going into my entire history with Subnautica and why it means as much as it does to me would take too long, so that might be something I cover in an entirely different video. For now, just know it's a great game, I love it, and I've played it for a good portion of my life. Now then, Magic the Gathering is a card game that has been around longer than I have. And over recent years, Magic the Gathering has been making new crossover sets with various different universes. These sets are referred to as Universes Beyond, and they can vary from more popular ones that people would recognize pretty easily, like Warhammer or Lord of the Rings, to ones that, while still being as popular, because of course they would be if they want to make money, aren't exactly as form-fitting as those other two universes that I just mentioned would be, such as Avatar: The Last Airbender or SpongeBob.
SpongeBob?
Hi, how are you?
Now, these new sets have created kind of a rift within the Magic community. There are a lot of older players who are saying they don't like how this takes away the focus from the very rich and beloved lore of Magic the Gathering and the story that they've been focused on throughout countless years. There are others, such as myself, who very much like the new sets, not because, of course, they're expanding upon these universes' stories, but just because it's fun to see our beloved characters within this game and being able to represent them when we play games like Commander. However, I am not here to try to throw my proverbial hat into the ring and tell you one is right over the other. No, my friends. I am here to do the one thing that every Magic the Gathering player dreams about doing at all points of the day, and that is info dump about my favorite deck that I spent an inordinate amount of time working on. But before I get to that, let me cover exactly what led us to this point of me making this insane time sink of a deck. As all these new Universes Beyond sets kept coming out, Zach asked me a simple question, and we had mentioned it a little previously on the channel. If I could have any universe that I wanted in a Universes Beyond set for Magic, what would it be? He, of course, like we said, didn't have to answer that hypothetical, because his would be Lord of the Rings. And if you hadn't seen, that set came out, and it was, pretty popular. You see, the franchise that I would have loved to see have a crossover isn't exactly as prolific or well-known as Lord of the Rings, or it's something like Avatar: The Last Airbender, or SpongeBob, although somewhat tangentially related. But by now, I don't have to allude to what that universe is. If you've seen the thumbnail or been listening thus far, you know what set I wanted.
That's right, Kirby, baby. I love Kirby in Magic the Gathering. Kirby is my favorite Magic the Gathering character. I love when he hang out with Jason, do his funny little dance.
No, but for real, it was Subnautica. Although, as a side note, a Kirby set would go hard, and don't pretend it wouldn't. However, the more I tried to envision my dream, the more I realized it likely wasn't going to happen. So, like I said, I came to one simple conclusion.
Fine. I'll do it myself.
And yes, I'm reusing the bit that we used in our first video. It's my channel, I like the funny Raisin Man. Grimace and his goof gauntlet aside, I then proceeded, over the course of the next 3 months, to design and print my own custom Universes Beyond Subnautica cards. Now, the process I used to design and print these cards would be a little too long to get into this video, like other topics that I had mentioned previously, so that will be its own tutorial that you can check out later on our channel, once I get around to it. I do, however, want to mention the app I used, which was cardconjurer.app. It's super useful, it's really streamlined on how you design the cards, there's really simplistic code that has tutorials built in, and if you're wondering why I look a little different and why I have a different shirt, it's because this is the first video that I'm making, and I'm recording over multiple days. However, the part that I will make a full tutorial for is how I managed to print them out on fully foil sheets and cut them out onto real Magic the Gathering cards, normally just basic lands. The process is really simple, but I feel there's just some small details I want to make note of a lot throughout the way, so that'll be its own video, as I said. Now then, onto the deck itself, or more importantly, the versions of the cards that I made for said deck. Now let me lead with this. Sea creatures are my favorite archetype in Commander. The first deck I really constructed all my own was Runo Stromkirk, which is a black-blue Reanimator sea creature commander. And I also made another sea creature deck called Kinesos, Priest of Thassa, which is a Simic sea creature commander that uses green and blue to scry a bunch and cheat them out off the top. However, both of those commanders, while being really fun in their own right, kind of missed the mark on getting all of the really cool and iconic sea creatures that exist within Magic. You have iconic creatures like Koma the Cosmos Serpent, or creatures that I have a high affinity for, like Rexiel the Risen Deep. But for most of the commanders that you look up that are sea creature themed, there's not really a Sultai one where you could play both those creatures in the deck, or other Dimir and Simic exclusive sea creatures as well. That was until he arrived onto the scene. Yes, Glarb was not designed with the intention of it being a sea creature tribal commander. However, everything he does just lends so well to what most sea creature decks want to do. He has top deck manipulation for cards like Kinesos, Runo, and Marvo, and he has a way to bin cards to the graveyard, which lends to the Reanimator bit that Runo likes to mess around with typically. So I ended up making this deck with all of these different sub-commanders in it and using Glarb as a generic value engine. So, after I built this deck, I realized this was it. This was the deck I was going to make into my Subnautica Secret Lair deck. I am now realizing I didn't clarify what it means to make a Secret Lair card in regards to a Universes Beyond set. What you would normally do is you take a card within Magic, just as the game, and you change its art and sometimes its flavor text to reflect a character or a scene from another franchise, and that being the franchise you're making the Secret Lair about. For instance, taking Path to Exile and changing the art to be Jace from Arcane being exiled from the Council. So, the most obvious question, what was I going to make Glarb? Initially, I kind of messed around with a few ideas like making him the main character from the first game, or even making him the planet to make it flavor like, oh, when I use Glarb to surveil, it's kind of like creatures are coming out from the planet itself. But I actually eventually landed on making him a hoverfish, because it's actually my favorite smaller fish from within the game itself. I used to carry one around with me in some of my earlier playthroughs just because I thought he was so cute and he would look at you and blink at you while you held him in your hand. I loved it. Oh, and as I'm bringing up these visuals for the cards to my side here, be sure to pay attention to the flavor text of these cards, because for some of them, it's a little more of just jokes. Others, I took literal quotes from the game or PDA logs that I thought personally were really cool or stood out to me. And others just end up being kind of my own little fan fiction that I end up writing for some of them, because I just think it's kind of cool if this little anecdote was true. But yeah, I put a lot of time into thinking about what should go in each card. Now, given not all of them can have flavor text, but the ones that I can fit it, I try to. So after moving on from the main commander of the deck, I then started to think about what my favorite part of the deck was going to be, the sub-commanders, what I was going to make them into. Now, for the majority of them, I actually turned them into different versions of the Peeper, because of course the Peeper is like Subnautica's poster boy, aside from, well, a much larger poster boy that we'll get into later. But however, for Marvo, who I still consider a sub-commander of the deck, even though he doesn't often get used as much as I'd like him to, I relegated him to the Crab Squid, mostly just because for the shape of the creature on the card, it kind of matches the Crab Squid in terms of build and recognizability, so I thought that was pretty fitting and cool. Now for Runo, I turned him into a card called the Humble Peeper, aka the regular Peeper. However, I realized that Runo on the front side is a vampire cleric. So reading that when you look at a Peeper and seeing that that's supposed to be a vampire cleric is kind of jarring. So to kind of poke fun at that, when I ran into these problems, which will occur later on, where you see a creature that doesn't really match its creature types on the card, I put a little in parentheses trust there when I remember to, as a bit of a joke to show that, like, I get it, it's not actually what it is, but, you know, it's my deck. I'll have fun with it how I want. I did, however, took some time to glaze Crothis, Runo's backside of the card, and turn it into the Sea Emperor, because I could not think of a better creature to turn from like this eldritch horror Cthulhu into our beloved Sea Emperor, the largest creature in the first game. Spoilers, of course, but I mean, this game has been out since I think it came out in 2013. I can't remember. Either way, yeah. Just so you know, spoilers ahead in most of these videos, because some of the cards get into some of the late game of even Subnautica Below Zero. And in regards to Kinesos and Mirko, who are two other sub-commanders in the deck, I turned Mirko, being the Dimir one, into the Oculus, the version of the Peeper you can find lower down in the caves. Whereas I turned Kinesos, the Simic commander, into an Arctic Peeper, because, I mean, hey, I want to show some love for Below Zero. I know the game wasn't exactly perfect when it comes to its story and everything, but I still had a lot of fun with that game, and I consider it part of the Subnautica series. Now that we've talked about some of the sub-commanders, it's time to talk about the most iconic creatures within Subnautica itself, and that's the leviathans. The leviathans are huge creatures you'll find roaming around the map that are the centerpiece of Subnautica's lore, as well as just its general atmosphere. When you're swimming around an area and you hear an incredibly large cry that sounds like it was echoing from even perhaps miles away, your heart will sink, especially if you've never heard that cry before. Now, Subnautica has one very infamous Leviathan that got quite YouTube famous, and in the words of the Deb, was responsible for over 50% of the game's sales. That is, of course, the Reaper Leviathan.
Hello! I'm an Otani!
Words cannot describe the pit you get in your stomach when you see the tail of this thing just kind of sink in and out of the blue mist going by you as you're exploring the world and just hear like a very distant echoing roar. It is incredible. So the question is raised, what card is worthy of being turned into Subnautica's Freddy Fazbear? And what I decided on, in my personal opinion, was Spawning Kraken. If you have played any sea creature deck before, you'll know how insanely scary of a card Spawning Kraken is. It is a 6-mana 6/6 that whenever it or another sea creature hits, being the creature types that you'll see displayed on the card, it makes a 9/9 Kraken, which, if you'll notice, also will make more 9/9s if it hits while this creature is still on the field. It is a nightmare for players to deal with, because in a few rotations it will just take over the board. And I will point out the flavor text for this card, which I am very proud of. It says, scans indicate that they use echolocation to locate and hunt their prey, meaning that if you can hear a Reaper Leviathan, it knows where you are. I had literal, persistent nightmares throughout high school playing the early versions of this game, and I kept playing it while still having said nightmares. That is how obsessed I was with this game, and clearly still am obsessed with this game. Now, while I think Spawning Kraken is the most iconic card in the deck, there is definitely a card that stands above it in overall strength to be the pillar of this singular card can just win games. That card, ladies and gentlemen, is Coma the Cosmos Serpent. For the uninitiated, Coma the Cosmos Serpent is a legendary Simic serpent that cannot be countered, and on each player's upkeep, makes a 3/3 blue serpent, and has the abilities to sacrifice a serpent to either tap down a permanent and make it so its activated abilities cannot be used this turn, or give himself indestructible. This is the closest thing, well, was the closest thing, that Magic the Gathering had to a Yu-Gi-Oh! Boss monster that I had ever seen. So of course, when designing the secret layer for this card, I had to make it the largest hostile creature that you can find in the entire game. Because while the Sea Emperor is the biggest, it's technically not hostile, which I guess doesn't make too much sense for Crothus' flavor, but you shut up. I made that decision, I'm sticking by it. No. I turned Coma into the Sea Dragon, the, once again, largest hostile creature in that game. You will hear this thing with its echoing roar the moment you enter its domain in the lava zone. And don't worry, I didn't forget about the Coma Coils. I turned those into 3/3 lava lizards, which are different, smaller creatures you can find within the lava zone that will attack your ship, or Cyclops, or whatever vehicle you bring down there. That's right, I didn't forget the tokens, so don't you worry, those are coming. Speaking of vehicles, I was able to include 2 out of the 3 that I really wanted to. Initially, I had the head shredder in for the prawn suit. However, as I played the deck more and more, I kind of realized that head shredder just really wasn't doing it for the deck because I had a lot of MDFCs, but not a large number of regular lands, so it wasn't really hitting all that much. But you'll find that with actually a lot of the cards on my master sheet that I'm going to link at the end of the video, is that there's just a good chunk that I end up not using, but I'm still very happy to show what I made and put it out there as a resource if anyone wants to print these or use them themselves. I was, however, able to include the Cyclops and the Seamoth. The Seamoth I included as a combo piece called Pemnon's Aura, which allows me to, with certain creatures, get infinite mana, or just equip it to Glarb to be able to give him Shroud or untap him in order to use Surveil again. And I included the Cyclops as Crashing Drawbridge, a 0/4 artifact creature that you can tap to give all your creatures haste. Not only is it just good in general, but it can also be used as a combo piece for a finisher with Genesis Wave. But that's for another point. Oh, and just in case you're curious, all of the artists that I was able to find for the arts of these cards will be credited on the cards themselves if you want to check any of them out. I will say for Subnautica's concept art, Pat Presley and Corey Strader were the two main names that were attributed to most of the pieces. However, there are a good chunk of them where neither them nor any artist was given credit. So for the ones where I just really couldn't find who made it or who drew it, I flipped a coin a lot of the time and just gave one of them credit. If you know specifically if I've gotten any of them wrong, if you see in this video or on the master doc, please feel free to let me know and I'll amend it to make sure that it's more accurate. Let me make it clear, these are not monetized in any way. If it was, I would have contacted these artists and gotten approval and everything like that, but I just made these for my own fun. If anybody doesn't want me using their art for these cards, absolutely let me know. I will find an alternative. While that would make me sad because if your arts are on these cards, that means I thought they were amazing, but at the end of the day, it is your work. I don't want to use it without your express permission. That being said, in this one video, I will not be covering the whole deck. This video would be hours long, and I don't have the mental fortitude to edit all that at once. I will, however, be going through my highlights of the deck. Now, let's get back to talking about some more of the cards. One of my favorite arts that I put into this deck was the one for Lightning Greaves. Lightning Greaves is a classic equipment. It goes into a ton of decks. You see it everywhere. However, in my Subnautica deck, I ended up making it the Sea Glide, a piece of equipment that you make very early on in the game that makes it so you can kind of dash all over the place a lot quicker than if you would just swimming around, which is pretty apt for Lightning Greaves. Now to talk about my absolute two favorite cards, art-wise, in the entire deck. Ripples of Undeath and Lurking Predators. Lurking Predators you could have probably guessed by now because I put it both in the thumbnail and showed it a little bit during the intro. I am very proud of how that card turned out, and I'm very happy that the artist was able to make such an amazing piece that I was able to utilize for this. You can see the Reaper Leviathan just hovering behind this poor diver about to eat him horribly and terrifyingly with a sinister grin on its face, and then I put my favorite flavor text in this entire set on this card.
Detecting multiple Leviathan class life forms in the region. Are you certain whatever you're doing is worth it?
For those who don't know, when you're playing in the game, if you find yourself in the biome the Dunes, I believe, you'll hear this voice line spoken to you by your PDA, and it will make your heart skip a beat. It is a terrifying thing to hear, and you hear it from a robot voice that normally just tells you only objective information, like what oxygen you have left or if you're low on water, and now it's saying you should fear for your life. So whenever I cast this card, I read out that flavor text, but I had amended a little bit. I say, detecting multiple Leviathan class creatures in your area. Are you sure whatever you're casting is worth it? Because it triggers every time an opponent casts the card. Yes, I'm that goddamn nerdy. Now, on to Ripples of Undeath. Me personally, I think Ripples of Undeath is just a completely underrated card. Outside of this entire deck's concept, like I think it's an amazing card that I should see in almost like, I'd say 70% of black decks. I think it's underutilized to all get out. But Ripples in this deck takes concept art done by Corey Strader, which is honestly my favorite concept art throughout all of Subnautica. And you could see that as evident by the fact that I turned my own playmat into it. But I just love how fitting it is for this card. The skull of the Gargantuan Leviathan looks so in line with the original art for this card, and then just the effect itself, it's just amazing. I then of course include the log that you get after scanning the skeleton, which is that this was an apex predator that was over 1 kilometer long that had to have burrowed its way into this cave system and maybe even gotten stuck there, and it's been dead for thousands of years. And it all comes together so well with this card. It just makes me smile every time I look at it. Now, if you are really entrenched in the Subnautica community, you'll know that that particular skeleton portrayed in that art spawned a very large mod, pun kind of intended, that was developed by a team of people just very dedicated to this, very obsessed with this game as much as I am, if not more, considering they made this mod, where they took the skeleton of this creature and took its description and then made a real live version of this monstrosity in the game called the Gargantuan Leviathan. It is a mod that had so many people working on this, was in development for years and years and years, and it was so prolific that I actually turned that Gargantuan Leviathan, the alive version of it, into a card. And what better card to make it into that other than Stormtide Leviathan? So I took Stormtide Leviathan, the biggest CMC creature in this entire deck, and turned it into the Gargantuan Leviathan. And if you'll notice down by the flavor text, I added a little bit where it says the precursors used to refer to this creature as Jormungandr. That is completely false. I added that because I'm a goddamn nerd. Listen, I could go on and on and on and on about this deck. But, like I said, we'd be here for over an hour. Those were just some of my highlights from it. But if you want a more comprehensive list of all the proxies that I've made for this, I'm going to have a Google Doc, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, linked in the description of this video, with all of the cards that I'm able to find, as well as ones that I'm going to keep looking for, and update as I make them, in that sheet for you to reference and print out yourself, all in the correct dimensions for you to use at your leisure. I'll also, however, be going over each of these cards one by one, or maybe by some groupings, depending, in our YouTube shorts on this channel. So if you want to see my in-depth reasons as to why I made certain arts a certain way, or why I included certain cards in the deck while cutting others, then stick around and subscribe. Take a look at our shorts, because this is something I'm really passionate about, and I'm very happy to have done and keep updating. Oh, and if you want to see another franchise that I'm actually doing and making an entire Commander Secret Lair Universes Beyond deck for it, I'm going to be making, and have been making, another one in the works currently. I don't want to give away the game that this one's going to be themed after, but, I mean, hey, if you've seen my Steam history, you could probably snuff it out. So, if you want to see more content like this, or the next deck that I'm going to be working on, or some more of those YouTube shorts I mentioned, then subscribe and stick around. Hey guys, Day 3 Shaving Jake here. By the time I'm recording this, the video is just about done, just adding the last few touches, but I wanted to record this last little bit just to say thank you for watching this all the way through. I had an amazing time making this deck and conceptualizing these cards, and it just means the world to me to be able to share this with as many people as I can. And especially when I play it at a shop and I run into Magic players who have either played through the games themselves or watched their friends play it and just have positive memories associated with the game like I have throughout most of my life. So with that being said, from the bottom of my heart, thank you for watching.